The drought of 1879 had already killed half his cattle when Thaddeus Garrett found them. 2 Apache women. Unconscious. Starving. And impossibly tall. Even collapsed in the dust beside his dying water trough, the shorter one stretched nearly 6 feet. The taller woman, God almighty, she had to be 6'4", maybe more. Their buckskin dresses hung loose on frames that spoke of recent hunger, but beneath the worn leather, muscle moved like coiled rope. These weren't ordinary Apache women. These were warriors. Thad's wooden leg scraped against stone as he shifted his weight. His Colt felt heavy in his hand. Every survival instinct screamed the same truth that had kept him breathing through Shiloh, through Apache raids, through 3 years of scratching existence from this cursed Arizona dirt. Walk away. But when the taller woman's eyes fluttered open, dark as winter midnight, intelligent as a preacher's sermon, something cracked inside his chest. She tried to speak. Failed. Her lips were cracked white with thirst. The shorter woman stirred, revealing a face marked by an old scar that had claimed her right eye, her remaining eye fixed on his, with the intensity of a wounded cougar. Thad stood there, sweat beading despite the October chill, knowing his next decision would either mark him as the biggest fool in Arizona territory or the deadest. What kind of man finds salvation in the desert only to discover it might cost him everything? Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. I read every single one. Thaddeus Garrett had been running from ghosts for 3 years. The wooden leg was a daily reminder of Gettysburg's 3rd day, when Confederate grape shot had shredded his left shin to kindling. But the real wounds ran deeper. Nightmares that jolted him awake, hands that shook when the silence stretched too long. Out here, 40 miles from Tucson, silence was all a man had. Until now. Water, the one-eyed woman whispered in English thick with Apache accent. Thad's hand trembled as he lowered his gun. These women could snap his neck without effort, even weakened as they were. But something in their desperation reminded him of his own reflection in still water. Hollow, haunted, barely holding on. He fetched his last clean water, watching as the taller woman helped her sister drink. Their movements spoke of long partnership, of trust earned through shared hardship. The tall one's dress had torn at the shoulder, revealing the swell of bronze skin and muscle that belonged on a cavalry trooper, not a woman. "I am Nalnish," she said finally, her English crisp and clear. "This is Deesba, my sister." Nalnish. Even her name sounded like wind through canyon stone. Thaddeus Garrett. Thad. He gestured toward his cabin with its sagging roof and broken dreams. "You running from something?" Nalnish's jaw tightened. "San Carlos." She spat the words like poison. "We are accused of killing Indian Agent's son." Thad's blood went cold. San Carlos. Reservation was a death sentence, wrapped in government promises. Overcrowded, underfed, and run by men who viewed Apache as less than human. If these women had killed an agent's son... Did you? No. Deesba spoke for the first time, her voice scarred like her face. But I would have. The honesty hit Thad like a fist. He'd seen what passed for justice at San Carlos. Heard whispers of women forced to warm officers' beds, of children dying from spoiled government beef, of proud warriors reduced to begging for scraps. Agent Morrison's son. He tried to take what was not offered. Nalnish continued, her dark eyes holding Thad's. When I refused, he said Apache women were government property. That resistance meant death. Something twisted in Thad's gut. He'd fought a war supposedly about freedom, only to watch his government cage these people like animals. "So you ran?" "We ran." Nalnish's hand found her sister's, their fingers intertwining with practiced comfort. "But Morrison follows. He wants us brought back alive, as examples. Through his window, dust rose on the horizon, still distant but coming fast. Thad counted his ammunition. 12 rounds for the rifle, 6 for his Colt. His water wouldn't last a week for 3 people, and his food stores were already dangerously low. Every practical consideration demanded he turn these women out before trouble arrived. Instead, he found himself studying the way Nalnish held her sister's hand. Protective, fierce, achingly tender. The gesture reminded him of letters from his own sister back in Illinois, letters that had stopped coming after Gettysburg took more than just his leg. "There's a root cellar behind the cabin," he said quietly. "Stone walls, hidden entrance. Morrison's men won't find you there." Nalnish studied his face with those intelligent eyes. "Why?" Thad looked at his reflection in her dark gaze and saw something he'd forgotten existed. A man worth saving. Because running from ghosts gets lonesome after a while. The cellar was cramped, musty, and darker than a sinner's conscience. But it was hidden. Thad had built it during his first winter, when Apache raids still painted the territory red. Now he crouched beside 2 Apache women, listening to boots thump across his cabin floor overhead, and wondered if irony was God's favorite joke. "Garrett!" Captain Morrison's voice carried the authority of federal law and personal vendetta. "I know you're here, you gimpy bastard." Through gaps in the stone, Thad watched 8 soldiers spread across his property, like wolves scenting prey. Morrison himself stood on the cabin porch, a bear of a man with cruel eyes and hands that belonged around a bottle instead of a badge. "These women killed my boy," Morrison called. "Slit his throat like a hog. Hiding them makes you an accessory to murder." Beside him, Nalnish tensed like a drawn bow. In the close darkness, Thad could smell sage in her hair, could feel the heat radiating from her bronze skin. When her shoulder brushed his, something electric shot through his chest, a hunger he'd thought buried with his leg at Gettysburg. "Your boy tried to rape me," she whispered, so low only Thad could hear. "When I refused, he called his friends. Deesbaugh found us. She protected me." Deesbaugh's scarred face remained impassive, but her hand rested on a wicked-looking knife at her belt. This one-eyed woman had killed to protect her sister's honor, and she'd do it again without hesitation. The boots moved closer. Morrison's men were searching methodically, professionally. Former cavalry, Thad guessed. Men who knew how to hunt Apache. They'd find this hiding place eventually. Nalnish must have sensed his thoughts. She leaned closer, her lips nearly touching his ear. "There is something Morrison wants more than our deaths." "What?" "Geronimo's last weapons cache. Hidden in the Dragoon Mountains. 50 rifles, ammunition, supplies for a winter campaign." Her breath was warm against his neck, stirring feelings he had no right to feel. "I know where it is." Thad's heart hammered against his ribs. If Geronimo still had access to weapons, the territory would run red with blood again. The information was worth more than 2 women's lives. Worth more than his own life. "You'd tell them?" Nalnish's dark eyes held depths he couldn't fathom. "To save my sister? To save a good man who showed us kindness?" Her hand found his in the darkness, her calloused palm warm against his skin. "Yes." The simple word carried the weight of betrayal, of survival, of impossible choices. Thad thought of his own war, of decisions made in smoke and screaming that still woke him nights. Sometimes living meant carrying ghosts. Overhead, Morrison's voice grew impatient. "Burn it down, boys. If Garrett's hiding in there, he'll come out dancing." The smell of coal oil drifted through the stone gaps. Nalnish rose in the cramped space, her impressive height making her seem like some ancient goddess of war and beauty. In the dim light filtering through stone, Her torn dress revealed the magnificent curve of hip and breast, the powerful lines of a woman built for survival. "I will trade the information," she said quietly, "but only if Morrison guarantees safe passage to Mexico for all three of us." Thad grabbed her wrist, feeling muscle like steel cable beneath smooth skin. "He'll kill us all, once he has what he wants." Her smile was sharp as winter wind. "Not if my sister puts an arrow in his heart first." In the darkness, Deesbaugh's scarred face split in a grin that would have terrified the devil himself. The negotiation took place in Thad's dusty yard, with the Arizona sun beating down like God's own judgment. Morrison sat his horse with the confidence of a man who held all the cards, his 8 soldiers spread in a loose semicircle with rifles ready. But Thad had fought enough battles to recognize uncertainty in the captain's eyes. The man needed that weapons cache more than he needed revenge. Nalnish stood between her sister and Thad, her impressive frame casting shadows across the hard-pan dirt. Even weakened by hunger, she moved with the fluid grace of a predator. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. 50. "Henry, repeating rifles," she said, her dark eyes never leaving Morrison's face. 2,000 rounds of ammunition, enough powder for 6 months of war. Morrison's tongue darted across his lips like a lizard tasting prey. "Where?" "First, your guarantee. Safe passage to the Mexican border for all three of us. No pursuit, no bounty, no federal warrants." "You killed my son. Your son tried to rape me in front of witnesses." Nalnish's voice never rose, never broke. "Apache law says a woman may defend her honor with any force necessary. Your own military code says the same." The words hung in the desert air like smoke. Around the semicircle, soldiers shifted uncomfortably. They'd all heard whispers about Morrison's boy. A drunk, a bully, a man who took liberties with reservation women because he could. Morrison's face flushed red as his horse's flanks. "Apache law means nothing to the United States Army." "Then neither does my information." The standoff stretched like a bowstring. Thad felt sweat beading on his forehead, tasted copper fear on his tongue. Beside him, Deesbaugh remained motionless as carved stone, but her single eye tracked every soldier's movement with predatory focus. Finally, Morrison spoke through gritted teeth. "Safe passage to Mexico. No pursuit for 60 days. Guaranteed by your word as an officer and gentleman." The mockery in Nalnish's voice was subtle as a knife between ribs. Morrison's jaw worked like he was chewing leather, but he nodded. "Cañon de los Embudos," Nalnish said finally. 3 miles north of the natural spring. Cache is buried beneath the lightning-struck oak. Morrison wheeled his horse toward his men, already barking orders. Within minutes, they were thundering north in a cloud of dust and ambition. In the sudden silence, Thad realized his hands were shaking. 50 warriors will die when they find that cache, he said quietly. Nalnish watched the dust settle, with eyes like winter midnight. 50 warriors were already dead. Morrison would have hunted them down within the month. At least now they will die fighting, not starving on the reservation. Her logic was brutal, perfect, and utterly without sentiment. Thad recognized the mathematics of survival. Sometimes saving 2 lives required sacrificing 50 others. He'd made similar calculations at Gettysburg, at Shiloh, in a dozen forgotten skirmishes where good men died for inches of muddy ground. Deesbaugh spoke for the second time that day. "We go now." Morrison will not honor his word past sunset. As they gathered the few supplies Thad could spare, Nalnish moved close enough that he could smell sage and woman sweat and something indefinably wild. Her hand brushed his as she took a water skin, and the contact sent lightning up his arm. "You could come with us," she said quietly. "Mexico has places for men who wish to forget their past." For a moment, Thad imagined it. Riding south with these magnificent, dangerous women, trading one exile for another, perhaps finding something that resembled peace in the high desert country. But when he looked at his cabin, with its broken dreams and hard-won solitude, he knew he wasn't ready for salvation. "This is my place," he said. "My ghosts live here." Nalnish nodded, as if she understood. Perhaps she did. Perhaps all survivors carried geography in their scars, landscapes of loss that couldn't be abandoned, only endured. She kissed his cheek then, quick and soft as butterfly wings. Her lips tasted of dust and promises, of roads not taken and lives unlived. Then they were gone, two giants walking south, toward a border that meant freedom or death, leaving Thaddeus Garrett alone with his silence and his ghosts and the lingering scent of sage. 3 years passed like desert wind, slow, inexorable, wearing everything down to bone. Thad sold the ranch in 1882, just after the last Apache surrendered and the territory finally bled itself quiet. He'd tried to make the place work, but every sunset reminded him of women walking south, of choices that saved some lives by sacrificing others. He found himself in Tucson's Palace Saloon on a Tuesday afternoon, nursing whiskey that tasted like regret. The bartender was telling anyone who'd listen about Geronimo's final surrender, about the last free Apache warriors being shipped to Florida prisons, about how the territory was finally safe for decent folks. Shame about those 2 giant Apache women. A drunk at the bar slurred, heard they died in some Mexican canyon, fighting federales. Thad's whiskey turned to ash in his mouth. Then she walked through the bat-wing doors. Nalnish looked older, leaner, weathered by sun and sorrow. She wore a white woman's dress now, her magnificent height making her seem like royalty, slumming among commoners. Her dark eyes found his across the smoky room, and something passed between them. Recognition, shared secrets, the weight of survived catastrophe. She approached his table with that same fluid grace, settling into the chair across from him like she belonged there. "Diesba?" he asked. "Dead." The word carried finality like a headstone. "Cholera, last winter. She died free in the mountains she loved." They sat in silence while the saloon noise washed around them. Laughter, arguments, the eternal human need to fill empty spaces with sound. Finally, Nalnish spoke again. "I work for the Indian Agency now. Translator, mediator. I help relocate the last holdouts to reservations." Her smile was sharp as broken glass. Ironic, perhaps. Morrison? Also dead. Killed in an ambush 6 months after our negotiation. Probably by Apache, who found the weapons cache empty. She paused, studying the amber liquid in his glass. "I never told him the truth." The cache had been moved 3 months earlier. Thad felt laughter bubbling up from somewhere deep and dark. "So we all ran for nothing?" "No." Nalnish's voice carried certainty like gospel truth. "We ran because running was the only choice that let us keep breathing. That let us become who we needed to be." Outside, Tucson was growing into a real city. Electric lights, telephone poles, the railroad bringing Eastern civilization to tame the last wild places. Inside the Palace Saloon, 2 survivors sat across from each other, sharing the comfortable silence of people who'd seen the wolf and lived to remember its teeth. "I should go," Nalnish said finally, rising with fluid grace. "Will I see you again?" She paused in the doorway, backlit by desert sun that turned her into a silhouette, a memory, a ghost made flesh. In this life or the next, Thaddeus Garrett. Some debts follow us beyond the grave. Then she was gone, leaving only the scent of sage and the whisper of skirts, walking back into whatever story came after survival. Thad finished his whiskey and stepped into the Tucson afternoon. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle mourned for all the places civilization couldn't touch, all the wild things that refused to be tamed. He walked toward the sound, toward whatever came next, carrying his ghosts like old friends and his memories like scars, proof that he'd lived, loved, and chosen to keep breathing, when breathing was the hardest thing of all. If this one moved you, hit that like button and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Every story needs witnesses, and yours might be next. Subscribe for more tales from the places where civilization meets the wild, where ordinary people face extraordinary choices, and where the human heart proves stronger than any frontier.